The Drive with Tim Donnelly here on 99.9 The Fan. Connecting with us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline, Tommy Ashley inside Carolina. You can follow him on Twitter at TAshleyIC. Tommy, thank you for taking time out of a very busy day here. A little bit of news in the ACC. I'll start with how jacked up are you for a nice little 10 p.m. kickoff in Palo Alto in the future for the Tar Heels?
Yeah, that's incredible. I didn't think we'd ever see the day that Stanford, California, and SMU get an invite to the SEC. I feel like the ACC's been, a little late to the ball game. A lot of good teams that were out there. Carolina's left with Stanford and Cal, and also SMU. What a crazy day! What a crazy vote!
And that's the next line, right? What do you make of? Right, I'm finally watching football last night. There was week 1 action, and all of a sudden there's this statement from the Carolina Board of Trustees all about how they're against expansion. Then I wake up this morning and expansion passed. What do you make of that little timeline over the last 24 hours?
Yeah, I think what happened is, I guess, NC State vote, and they changed their vote to support the addition. I think it's a lifeline the ACC is trying to throw to its schools, but I don't think it changes much as far as the teams that want to get out. The question is not when, it's how. And for the ACC, you got to give them credit. They locked these guys in for a lot of money and made leaving difficult. Otherwise, the ACC might look like the Pac-12.
Don't you say that, Tommy. Don't you put that energy in the world. But I mean, it is that eye-opening, right? When you think of the Pac-12, you go back 20 years, and they had Pete Carroll and Matt Leinart, and Oregon was on the rise, and to see where they are now, is the grant of rights, in your opinion, enough? Is that giving us some kind of ability to sleep at night to make sure the ACC doesn't end up that way?
Well, I think eventually somebody's going to figure out a way to get out of there. But to my colleague Greg Barnes said a couple of days ago when we did, or actually a couple of weeks ago when we did a realignment show, is the grant of rights that the ACC got member schools to sign 10 or so years ago is worked. It's prevented teams from leaving. Now, it's also hurt some teams. Florida State, Clemson, they want out. Carolina's suffering a little bit on the money side. When the money, Tim, is so great around college football and around college athletics, it's difficult to be in a group that's not getting near as much. And I think the numbers will play out, and the ACC schools will be getting half of what the Big Ten and the SEC get eventually. That's not sustainable for the teams in the league that want to compete on a national scale, especially in college football. So crazy times.
Very much so. Tommy Ashley, inside Carolina, joining us here on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. Using that logic, and this is the part that's not really connecting with me, is the schools that are most upset that they're not making all the money that the Big Ten and the SEC are making. Outside of Clemson, you could say they're not dominating the ACC where they do have the most money because, right, they're all getting the same grant of rights share. Meanwhile, those brands bring in so much more other revenue. Under the logic of you can't compete with that without making all the money, wouldn't they be 1, 2, 3 in the ACC every year?
You would think. You look at a school like, say, Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's in the SEC. They're getting that share of the pie. But nobody's talking about Vanderbilt football, not in a positive way at least, and that's no disrespect to them. But money is not everything. But in this day and age, and I find it interesting when I look at it this way, when you're getting so much money from your media deal, you can build facilities, and you can build nice toys for all the players and all the athletes. Well, now that you have NIL, some of that money's got to go to that too. So you have boosters, say at North Carolina and other schools in the ACC, that are having to build facilities for schools. We see names of, so-and-so's name on a locker room and all that. Well, that money could go to NIL. And I think that sort of changes this game as far as where the money goes and what the money is needed, is because my media rights deal can build all the new toys. My boosters' money can go to the players. And that's where you're going to see the gap sort of widen, I think. Ultimately, will it widen for everybody? No, because it's just not. But when you go to Alabama's campus and every building on campus is brand new, and you ask, how in the world do y'all do this? And they say it's football money. That's where it's going to start to come into play, especially with the NIL deal where you've got to start paying players to come to your school as well.
Tommy Ashley, Inside Carolina. Let's transition to the game tomorrow, which is a nice breath of fresh air for the legal recourses and the votes and everything. But of course, Carolina has to pull some appeals and process from all the other mess onto the football field. How is the team preparing, knowing that Tez Walker's appeal is still up in the air and he's such a big part of that offense, and you got to have him ready, but also the guy that might play in his place ready? What's that do to the offense?
It's a challenge, and how ridiculous is it? Let's be honest.
Very much so, and I want to be on the record with you here saying ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're not a North Carolina fan or if you're a North Carolina detractor, this could be your school at some point in all of this. And Tez Walker is a young man who's done everything he was asked to do, everything that he was supposed to do, and yet he's laying in limbo waiting. As far as getting ready for the game, I mean, North Carolina's prepared. He's practiced with the ones a lot. You got to prepare both ways. You only get so much time with these guys. The bottom line is, though, at 7:30 Saturday night, somebody's going to have to step up and make a play, and there are no excuses. Because when the game's said and done, nobody's going to say, oh, well, Carolina didn't have Tez Walker. South Carolina's going to either win or lose based on who they put out there. North Carolina's got to do the same. But just a ridiculous situation. I mean, the NCAA, of all their faults, this is probably the biggest. They preach. We see that commercial all the time about student athletes and we care about their well-being. You've got a young man in this situation that they've just left in limbo, and I have no rational explanation other than they're just incompetent at best, or it's downright just wrong at worst. It is a bad situation for North Carolina, but ultimately you got to deal with it.
And that's where the football cliches come in, right? Control what you can control and all these other things, right? Coaches, you write them on the wall and I don't know, smack it when you walk out the door. I mean, you're already, meaning Carolina, already replacing Josh Downs, Antoine Green, guys that are in the NFL and looking solid, like in addition to just being in the NFL. How do they replace all of that production? And let's go with the hypothetical of Tez Walker's not available tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's interesting because you replace that production in the transfer portal and you keep right on going. Well, with Walker's situation, you see the depth chart. Nate McCullum's listed as an or with Kobe Paysor. So what happens is you've got guys like Kobe Paysor, guys like Gavin Blackwell, Doc Chapman, maybe some young guys that step up and make plays. The thing that I've noticed, or that were one of the biggest things for me last season, is when Josh and Antoine were out, other guys came in and made plays that weren't named Tez Walker or Nate McCullum. And I think we'll see that on Saturday night with Drake Maye is going to spread the ball around. I think Paysor has a big game. I think Blackwell and Doc Chapman can play well. But I think what you'll see is North Carolina's tight end room really get a lot of targets and a lot of catches, because those guys we don't talk about. Everything is lost in the Tez Walker deal. But North Carolina's tight end room is one of the best in the country. And John Copenhaver's really, sort of exerted himself to the front of that line. And so I think North Carolina's offense will be okay. But it is surely nice, right, when you can just say, go deep and throw it, and a guy can outrun everybody on the field. Won't be the case if Walker doesn't play, but we'll see what happens. I think Drake will be fine. I think North Carolina's offense may not get the freebies they're used to with a guy like Downs or Antoine Green or Tez Walker, but they'll still be effective, I think.
I think this shows how chaotic college football is right now and how chaotic it is away from the field with Carolina, that we're talking about North Carolina, South Carolina tomorrow. It's going to be college game day. It's going to be one of the biggest games of the year. And it took us like 8 minutes to even mention Drake Maye, like just to say his name, because when you look at this game, it starts with the quarterbacks, Drake Maye, Spencer Rattler. The off the field stuff is the drama, the reality television of it. But when it comes to Drake Maye, focusing in on him, last year, the last 4 or 5 games, whatever it was, they're was something different, right? The first 8 or 9 games, he looked like he was going to be the number 1 overall pick, and it slowed down. What was it that slowed him down, and do you expect them to have it fixed?
Well, I think, especially when you look after that Wake Forest game, he was fantastic up until that. And I think what happened there is teams sort of started to figure out, let's keep him in the pocket, let's force him to make plays from the pocket, and then rush 3 or 4 and drop everybody else and close those windows, even for a guy like Josh Downs. Now, Downs was still able to get open, but he was not able to get open and make plays in space as much. And so North Carolina's offensive line, I think, sort of suffered a little bit at the end of the season, causing a lot of those issues for Drake. No quarterback likes pressure in your face. If you've paid attention to Inside Carolina and when we've talked about Spencer Rattler, he's a guy who, when he's clean in the pocket, he is fantastic. But when he has got pressure, especially in his face, he is not. And Drake sort of felt some of that later in the year. And that's, you get beat up, guys get banged up, teams have a ton of tape. The bottom line in that regard is North Carolina's offensive line is going to have to keep him clean, especially up the middle, to give him opportunities to go through his progressions and not have to do it on the fly all the time. Last year he made so many great plays just winging it, and that needs to change a little bit because at some point the luck and that type thing run out. So I think for this game, especially against South Carolina, whose defensive line has got some talent, but they're not an elite defensive line, Drake has to have some time to make some plays that are not in simple chaos mode. If we want to keep the theme of the show so far, chaos on the field, I think, is where Carolina's offensive line and Randy Clements and those guys come in handy on Saturday.
Tommy Ashley, Inside Carolina. Follow him on Twitter at TAshleyIC. Tommy, last one before we let you go, to stick with chaos. If what you said, right, Spencer Rattler is a guy that doesn't like trash around his feet, doesn't like pressure. Does the Carolina defense have the dogs to blitz the house and create some chaos for him and throw him off his game?
Whew, that's a $64,000 question, right? I mean, last year, I think the stat is North Carolina, when they blitzed, they created havoc on 9% of those plays. That means on 91% of the time Carolina blitzed, it did no good.
Just had less people in coverage.
It's like I said on our radio show last night. You might as well run somebody off the field and play with 10 because that's all it did to North Carolina. So that'll be the key. The defensive line has gotten hammered over the last couple of years. They brought in Ted Monachino to get more pressure there. I think the difference Saturday night is Carolina's ability to cover better. They lost a ton out of the portal on the defensive backfield, but they've got some young talent, and Elijah Huzzy, whether he's at a corner spot or in the slot, provides opportunities to give that defensive line just a few more, another second, another half second to make a difference and cause problems. And we haven't even talked about Cedric Gray or Power Echols. I mean, Cedric Gray is one of the best linebackers in the country. So I think the key for Carolina's defense is those corners and that secondary being able to provide just enough coverage to allow guys to get to their spots. And you'll see a guy like Kamen Rucker be able to make some plays and not be just late on a potential sack. It's going to be a good ball game. It's going to be ugly at times. And it's South Carolina and North Carolina. If I had to flip a coin, I don't even know if I'd trust a coin flip, Tim.
and I don't know if you should. Tommy, we appreciate the time. Enjoy the game and enjoy the week 1 of college football.
Absolutely. Love to have it. Certain cable companies need to get it figured out so we can watch some football, but maybe they'll get that done. But definitely college football is back.